We are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 12 of season 3, you guys know the deal. I got to talk to you about a few quick things. First off, if you are new to the channel, please make sure to like and subscribe. And then also, if you aren't so much into long form content, follow us on Instagram because we post debate topics, reels, and reminders to watch each and every episode on our Instagram. So go in the description below this video. There is a link. Click that link to Instagram and hit that follow button. We'd greatly appreciate that. Also, below this video, you see an arrow button. That is a share button. You can share us to Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. So make sure to do so if you happen to like today's episode and you know other Detroit Pistons fans. We'd greatly appreciate that. You know, we can put out all the content we want, but in the end, it comes down to you guys, the listeners, to help grow us and help us make a splash in the Detroit Pistons community. So we would greatly appreciate that. And Ryan, pretty soon here, we are going to be talking about Cade Cunningham versus Jalen Brunson in episode number 12. But first off, Ryan, going on with the Pistons right now, they're on a 7-game winning streak. They're playing great and they're firing all cylinders, and they extended their winning streak to 7 against the Clippers. A rock solid team, has a good core around them, right? A lot of good vets. And it was a pretty big statement win to beat a team in the West like that. But Ryan, when it comes down to the winning streak and the chemistry the Pistons have right now, what do you think are their keys to their success? Is it a specific player or is it a statistic?
I think it is a specific player, but I don't think it's just one. I think it's multiple. First and foremost, it's most definitely in the hands of Cade Cunningham.
Right.
You look at post All-Star break between the Spurs, Hawks, and Clippers, he's put up 25 plus points, 12 plus assists. And it's not just offensively, he's doing it defensively too. So against the Hawks, he had 3 blocks and a steal. Against the Clippers the other night, he had 3 steals. Like, he's not just doing his offensive game. There's also another layer to it with defensively. But besides him, there always has to be somebody else. And the somebody else is the whole team. You look at Asar Thompson. Asar Thompson may not have filled up the box score the other night, but he's still, defensively, his presence was known. Or you look at Tobias Harris. He may not have 22 points every single night, but he's going to do his fair share of work. Tim Hardaway Jr. may not have shot or made a single 3 against the Clippers, but he still contributed in other ways, because just having him out there, his presence alone, it adds another man that you have to go out and guard. You look at Malik Beasley. Beasley didn't even have the best night ever against the Clippers, but him being out there, you have to look to guard him. And you had the situation there towards the end where the Clippers started rushing their shots a little bit more to try to get themselves back in it. And Malik kicked it, had the ball. Cade comes up wide open because they're more focused on Malik shooting the 3 and hitting it than Cade shooting the 3. And Cade easily just hits the shot right in their face. Nobody's around. But that's the point. It's the slew and the crew that is really bringing the most out of Cade, per se, but also contributing the most to these wins. It's the cast. It's not just Cade. Yes, Cade is playing out of his mind, but it's just the team is also playing out of their minds too.
Well, and I want to give a brief shout out to Isaiah Stewart, somebody in the past that I've been very tough on in his first 3 seasons previously to this. And he is basically the perennial backup to Jalen Duren. When Jalen Duren is injured or struggling with fouls, Isaiah Stewart steps up to the occasion. And Ryan, we were watching the Pistons game with your dad the other day. He brought up how is Isaiah Stewart making a case for one of the premier shot blockers in today's NBA? And yeah, he is making that case. He is blocking big name players and just being an absolute beast in the paint, while also scoring when the defense allows him and and protecting the paint, but also rebounding offensively and defensively. He excels defensively, rebounds. Offense needs to be something to work on, but he's still there as well. So a lot of these guys that we were worried, will they take the next step? Will they do this? Will they do that? Well, Isaiah Stewart was one of the guys that has stepped up to the occasion. And I think having a cast of characters, like you mentioned, just great guys around him makes Stewart better because he doesn't need to worry about taking that extra 3-point shot or trying to get fouled in the inside paint so he's hogging the ball or doing these little things that he doesn't have to worry about anymore. And he's playing at a high level right now, and not many backup centers can keep up with Isaiah Stewart. And that's just so great to see because that was a presence that we needed and we were trying to fill for multiple years. And now Isaiah Stewart is really that guy. So just trying to give him his blessings, a little bow to Isaiah Stewart, because I feel like not many people are talking about him, but he's definitely a big part of that bench play and keeping the defense alive when the starters are on the bench. So I'm just really proud of what Isaiah Stewart has done to get to this point, and he's helping the Detroit Pistons win in a big way. Let's get into today's topic. And guys, this is an interesting one. We're going to talk about Cade Cunningham versus Jalen Brunson. About 4 months ago, we did an episode talking about Cade versus Paolo Banchero, and people seem to like it. And so we've noticed nationally a lot of commentators bringing these two guys' names up. I know on the No Chill Gil podcast with Gilbert Arenas and his LA crew, they were talking about like, okay, well, Brunson's a great scorer when you need him in the big moments. Brunson's going to step up, but Cade Cunningham is a facilitator who's going to scorch you offensively when, in the depths of each quarter, not necessarily in the clutch like a Jalen Brunson, but he's going to get you and hurt you in many different ways. So they're very different point guards, right? Because Cade Cunningham has the size department, but Jalen Brunson's a smaller guard who's going to try to beat you off the dribble. And one thing before we get into some of the statistics and quotes from people about this Cade Cunningham versus Jalen Brunson debate, I want to make sure that you, the listeners, know that as we're debating this or discussing this, it's not who has a better career or a better scorer or who is a better defender or overall basketball player, but who is a better starting point guard, who makes an impact with their teammates, shares the ball better, who translates into wins more, and etc. So like, would the Knicks be better off if Cade Cunningham was their starting point guard, or would the Pistons be better off if Jalen Duren was the starting point guard for the Detroit Pistons? That type of debate, not necessarily, who had a better college career, who, Jalen Brunson played so good at Villanova, winning multiple accolades. No, it's not about the career. It's about this year's stats and who's a better player for their respective teams this season. And we obviously saw both of them play in the Eastern or on the All-Star weekend as All-Stars. But Ryan, I've been seeing so many quotes from Twitter, like this one. Quote from Twitter says, "He's better than Brunson. I will not be told otherwise," declare a fan on X, talking about Cade Cunningham. It seems like a lot of commentators are starting to pit them together, mainly because we're seeing both of these teams kind of solidify themselves as winners in the Eastern Conference. You always kind of get pitted together, right? When the Pistons were at the bottom half of the league, and so were the Houston Rockets, right? The Pistons were getting pitted against the Rockets, and then Cade against Jalen Green. Now that, these two Eastern Conference teams and the Knicks and Pistons are competing at a high level, you're going to start getting compared to some of these, bigger names, bigger teams like we're seeing with Cade Cunningham. Ryan, before we get into the stats, what pops out to you right away? Because obviously we love our guy Cade. We said in last week's episode we'd like Jalen Brunson if he wasn't on the Knicks. It's because he's a Knick player we don't like him. But Ryan, what stands out to you right away as far as like who's better here? Who's having a better season, Cade or Jalen?
So to me, with this topic, it's more so, and this is just, I'm throwing this out there, more so in the sense of, obviously, Cade is a number 1 overall pick. Jalen Brunson is a second-round pick. That has to be like in bold. Like they're not to the same level as each other in terms of
Okay.
overall I can't even talk right now, but in overall talent, they are not at the same level.
Okay.
And the only reason I say that is because if you just go solely based off of where they were drafted and what the expectations were. The expectations on Jalen Brunson coming into the league was more so like, can he actually play at this level? Does he have the size?
Correct.
Does he have the speed? Does he have all the intangibles to play at this next level? That he was such a great player in college at Villanova for Jay Wright, who by far is one of the best coaches of all time. But is his game going to translate to the NBA? Whereas Cade, you flip the switch, it's not necessarily is his game going to translate to the NBA. It's how good is this guy actually going to be? So just the amount of light and pressure that was put on these two guys is completely different. What Jalen Brunson has done so far in his career, and I know we're not talking careers, but what he's done in his career is impressive. What Cade Cunningham has done in his career is impressive. But if we're solely focusing on this season, which we are, to really break this down, there's multiple layers to it because it's not just stats, but it's also like you said, it's more so how do they play, how do they fit in with their respective teams, and truthfully, I think Brunson is like the perfect match for the Knicks and what they're trying to do right now. And I think
Totally.
Cade is the perfect match for what the Pistons are trying to do right now. Not necessarily that the Knicks have built their team around Jalen Brunson, because that is clearly not the case. But in regards to the Pistons, they've built their team around Cade Cunningham. So it's just there's two different lenses to this story, and there's not just one like, okay, Brunson is better for the Knicks because this, and this, or Cade is better for the Pistons because of this, and this. It's more so really focusing on all the small little details along the way to really, it's just kind of like a puzzle. They're one small piece to the bigger picture, but in Brunson's case, he's the small piece, whereas Cade is the big piece of the puzzle. So there's multiple different ways to look at this topic today. And it's not just necessarily, again, it's not career, but if you were to bring that into the conversation, which you could certainly, it just, there's so many layers to this that there's just a lot.
So if you talk about similarities and as far as the Knicks team that is around Jalen Brunson and the team that's around Cade, they both excel with uber athletic centers, right? You know, Cade's got Jalen Duren. Right now, Brunson's got Carl Anthony Towns, but then he's also got Mitchell Robinson off the bench, who plays very valuable minutes for that New York Knicks roster. He's just injured right now. So these guys both excel with the pick and roll, right? Getting those big men involved. It's not like a Cleveland Cavaliers situation with Jarrett Allen, who Jarrett Allen is, you know what? If you want to score, go and get the offensive rebounds. If you want to score, you got to be perched in the paint. No, what Jalen Brunson and Cade do a good job of is the pick and roll, getting the ball up above the rim to their guys to get those lob passes, set them up. So they both excel as far as facilitating. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out because as we look through the stats, we're going to see a story unfold. And the thing with Cade Cunningham's stats that we do have to take a note of is that his stats are different with the absence of Jaden Ivey. So right now, you know, his points per game, his assists per game are still on the up and up since, you know, when he was with Jaden Ivey. But since he's been with Jaden Ivey, his stats have been much better. So I'll try to bring in his stats since the injury to Jaden Ivey because it will show a little bit more of a full story than just his averages. So talking about stats, and Ryan, I'm going to be interested to know what you say after we list some of these out. But as far as games played, Jalen Brunson has played 3 more games than Cade with 56 games, Cade 53. Minutes per game, they both average 35. Points per game, right now, Jalen Brunson is at 26 points per game. Cade is averaging 22.6 points per game, but with the absence of Jaden Ivey, he is averaging 27. Field goal percentage, Jalen Brunson is at 49. Cade is at 46 from the field. 3-point percentage, Jalen Brunson 39% and Cade 37%. So as far as efficiency, not a drastic difference and nothing too crazy. Free throw percentage, Cade is at 85, Jalen is at 82. Rebounds per game, Cade is at 5, Brunson's at 3. Assists per game, they are the same, 7.5 assists per game. You could round that up and say 8. Some people like to round up stats. Turnovers per game, Brunson is at 2.5. Cade is at 3.4. Steals per game, they are both at 1 steal a game, which I love Cade being at 1 steal, by the way. Blocks per game, obviously Brunson's not getting many blocks. He's averaging 0.1 and Cade 0.4. So as far as talking about the stats, it's not a drastic change. The only thing is the points per game, where you would like to see Cade a little bit more than 22.6. But Ryan, as far as efficiency, we're looking at very statistically same players, and that's probably why they're being pitted against each other nationally with commentators. But Cade 36%. What from the 3? Let's add how did he make the 3-point contest? Okay, and Brunson at 39. So not huge many differences. But Ryan, any first thoughts as far as statistics are concerned?
So to me, if you really, let's say Jaden Ivey is even out there, I think the way Cade has been playing as of late, he would still be playing that same way. Because pre-All-Star Cade is completely than post-All-Star Cade. Post-All-Star Cade, just all of a sudden the spark ignited and he's just full steam ahead. Whereas before All-Star break, it's like, okay, Cade, you just had a great game. And then it's kind of like he'd simmer down a little bit. And then he'd come back up, and then he'd simmer down a little bit. And then maybe have a couple, 2-3 games in a row where it's like, okay, Cade, that was amazing. And then it comes back down. But now, post All-Star weekend there, you're having a situation where Cade's not just doing his thing, but he's doing his thing at a very high level, but also including his teammates in the mix too. It's not like he's just doing one thing versus the other. He's elevated his game entirely while including his teammates. Whereas Brunson, and honestly, their stats are nearly identical, but they have different roles within their teams. Brunson, if you take him away and let's say you threw in, honestly, let's say you threw in a better point guard than Brunson, and I'm not saying Brunson's bad, but if you threw in a little bit more of a higher level, scorer, everything than Brunson, it would be a whole different conversation for the Knicks, just because I think I think the Knicks are actually balanced with Brunson. So yes, he's scoring 26 points a game, which seems absurd for him, but it's because he brings the team balance. Because when Cat isn't going off and doing his thing, when Mikal Bridges isn't going off and doing his thing, when the whole slew isn't going off and doing their things, Brunson is the guy that steps up. Whereas the Pistons here with the 22.6 and really 20 around the same thing now post Jaden Ivey, they need Cade. And honestly, even if you go back to the Hawks game with Dennis Schroeder going off for 16, which was fantastic, by the way, Cade made a statement and was like, yeah, honestly, if you take what Schroeder did away from the game, we would have lost. So that's Cade going yes, I did a lot, but my teammates did more. Whereas you look at the Knicks, and we're not watching the Knicks night in, night out like we are the Pistons. So maybe Mikal Bridges has his night. Maybe Cat has his night. Maybe OG Anunoby has his night. Maybe Brunson has his night. But I think more often than not, it's more so Brunson's having the hot hand than any of those guys, and those guys are just accessories. And so when you look at the stats and compare the points per se, or even just the rebounds, and obviously there's a size difference there, I think what Cade is doing with the Pistons right now is a little bit more impressive stat-wise than what Brunson is doing with the Knicks, because everybody expects Brunson to do what he's been doing. but Cade has elevated his game night in and night out. And it's not just like maybe like the other night, he had only 7 assists against the Clippers, or eight, was it? 8 assists versus the Clippers. The previous 2 nights in front of that against the Hawks and the Spurs, he had 12 assists. But in those 3 games still, you had 25 points, 28 points, and like 32 points. So it's like it's differing. Maybe one night he's, as he put it, don't touch me, I'm sizzling. So maybe he has one of those games where it's like he's going off. He had 29 going into halftime, finishes with 32 or 38 rather. Great night, fantastic play. Brunson is not doing that in a first half. Brunson's probably putting up 14, 15 points going into halftime and then finishes what he normally finishes at. Whereas Cade, you can almost guarantee when the ball is in his hands, he's going to score, or he's going to make a smart pass that ends in a score. Whereas Brunson, he doesn't turn the ball over a lot. He's one of those good point guards that rarely turns the ball over. And when he does, it's kind of like he's trying to be a little fancy. But Brunson, he has all the tools around him to be successful. He can just pick, like it doesn't matter. But then you get to the second unit, and this is the one thing that I think Cade stats really excel at, is because if you compare the second units and you look at what Cade has versus what Brunson has, you go like, okay, Cade has the better team, because the Knicks do not have a second unit. All their guys on their bench are really guys that would probably be in the third unit for the Pistons. And there's no disrespect there. But if you look at what Cade has been given from a whole roster standpoint, the stats to me are, well, see, the thing is, I would say more impressive to me, because you look at that second unit, you have Stu, who's not a shooter at all. You have Simone Fontecchio, who is a shooter, but he's not really there defensively. You have Ron Holland, who needs to develop his three-point shot still, and a jumper in general. There's a lot of those guys in that second unit that really don't have a shot, but when Cade's out there, they have a shot. Whereas Brunson with the Knicks, he doesn't have a second unit really. And so when he's out there with those guys, it's more of like he's having to take on the workload himself and do everything. So when you look at these stats, yes, do they have almost identical stat lines? Of course they do. But when you really break it down and you think of what Cade has versus what Brunson has, when it's not the starters out there, I think the stats are a little bit more impressive for Cade than with Brunson, just because he's including everyone out there. It's not just himself, because Cade could easily just do his thing and not include anyone else. Whereas Brunson, it's kind of like all the attention and focus has to be put onto him, onto his shoulders, which again, that proves the point that his stats are also impressive too. But I think just in the sense of what the expectations were for this season with the Knicks versus the Pistons, everybody expected the Knicks to be where they are at. Nobody expected the Pistons to be where they're at right now.
Yeah, the Pistons are absolutely blowing up the East. I'll get to that in just a second. Make sure to comment below your thoughts after hearing some of the stats of Jalen Brunson versus Cade Cunningham. Just a quick note, New York Knicks are in third in the Eastern Conference at the time of this recording. They are 37-20. Detroit Pistons are in sixth, but they're tied with games won with the Indiana Pacers and Milwaukee Bucks. So with a couple of wins, we could see the Pistons flirting with the fourth spot, which would be just absolutely terrific. So just 5 games behind the New York Knicks, and any type of slide in games, the Pistons can be looking at flirting with trying to take a spot away from the New York Knicks. And I know as Detroit Pistons fans, you should be pretty ecstatic with hearing that. That's pretty exciting stuff. So, of course, as far as in-game play, we've seen Jalen Brunson and Cade Cunningham have several matchups against each other in Cade's 3 seasons with the Pistons. But in their last 5 matchups against each other, they are both putting up some pretty big numbers. They play their each prospective teams very well. In the last 5 games against the Pistons, Jalen Brunson averages 35 points, 9.2 assists, 3.2 rebounds in the last 5 games. So, and we know Brunson always plays the Detroit Pistons very, very well. And then Cade Cunningham against the Knicks in his last 5 games, he averages around 35 minutes in those games. He averages 30 points, 8.2 assists, 5 rebounds in his last 5 games versus Jalen Brunson. There again, not much of a huge difference statistically, but Cade, compared to his average, stepping up his assists with 8.2 and 5 rebounds. And what we see against the Knicks a lot is Jalen Brunson tries to use his speed against Cade Cunningham. He does have an advantage in that category, even though, Cade can keep up. But Brunson loves to use his shiftiness. And as far as categories and who is better in what right now, based on the stats we see, Jalen Brunson scoring efficiency is a little bit better than Cade. So he averages from the field 26, 22, right? But his shooting 49% versus Cade's 46%, and 3-pointers 39.5 versus Cade's 36.5. So as far as scoring efficiency, a little bit better. We also do have to take in mind that Brunson's had more seasons with in the NBA. I believe he was a rookie in 2019, 2018. Is that correct? Or was he 2017? I can't quite put my finger on that.
It would have been what was it? I want to say 2018.
2018. Yeah, that great year by the way. But yeah, so he's had more seasons on Cade anyway. Playmaking and ball handling, Brunson also kind of has the upper edge. Um, not by too much though. The biggest thing is, Cade does struggle with turnovers, has made it a lot better this season, but historically struggles with turnovers. Brunson only 2.5 a game. Really, he's only messing with 1 or 2 a game. When you have a couple bad games, your averages get a little worse. Cade is at 3.4. But as far as rebounding and defense, Cade's got that upper edge on Jalen Brunson. Both average 0.9 steals per game. Cade averages half a block, Brunson half 0.1. So we are looking at, and it's pretty obvious too, because with the physicality that Cade plays with, he makes a big effort on the boards. I mean, I think it was the win against the Atlanta Hawks. He had 7 going into the third quarter. And he's a triple double machine for a reason. That's because he really puts an emphasis on the rebounding category, because he knows if he gets a couple jump balls or a couple wins and as far as the effort stats, that sets the Detroit Pistons up just for that much more success. And Jalen Brunson to be more of like a true, like historic point guard, like just the mold of like the normal point guard, he's not going to be really getting boards that much. But Ryan, I think as a starting point guard in today's NBA, it's very important for the point guards to be making emphasis on those rebounds. So obviously each player has their positives and negatives, right? Jalen Brunson a little bit more efficient, but Cade better defensively. And I think, yes, he doesn't average as many assists, but he makes more of an effort to facilitate. You mentioned the second unit and some of the players the Knicks have or don't have. The Pistons kind of have a better roster than the Knicks. They just have more chemistry than the Knicks do. So I think Cade really tries to make an emphasis on scoring or passing rather. It's just more Brunson finds himself as a shifty guard, passing it out from the paint more. And as he's cutting to the basket, he's pushing the ball out to the 3-point line. Ryan, to settle the debate, you're starting an NBA franchise. You're the GM. You're not anything like Nico, the Dallas Mavericks GM. You're actually held in high regard. Who are you taking? You have to choose between Jalen Brunson or Cade Cunningham. Who are you taking?
Well, the obvious choice is Cade Cunningham. And that's just solely because if you want a star player, Cade Cunningham is a star player. Not that Brunson is not a star player, But if you want a player who has the possibility to be in multiple MVP conversations for a long time, go Cade Cunningham. If you want a guy that's going to play at a very high level night in, night out and be considered an all-star for pretty much his entire career, go with Jalen Brunson. They're both winners. They've proven that.
Right.
But there's multiple layers to it. Who is the better overall player? Who is the better specified player? I think the better specified player is Jalen Brunson. The better overall player is Cade Cunningham. So do you want a guy that can play like Magic Johnson and play multiple different positions? Or do you want a guy in Jalen Brunson that can really only play one position? That's the question at hand. Do you want a guy that can do that wears multiple hats? Or do you want that one guy that's like, you know what to expect out of him every single night? And to me, I'd want Cade Cunningham. But if Cade wasn't an option and you looked at the rest of the point guards in the NBA, and obviously let's take out Steph Curry and the first ballot Hall of Famers, I would take Jalen Brunson. I would take Brunson over Trae Young. There's a lot of guys in the NBA that I would take Brunson over, and that's just because of his work ethic alone and just the nature in which he developed as a player. Because he had Jay Wright, he had his dad, he's had numerous people around him that has turned him into the player he is today. And the player he is today is all because of hard work, not necessarily just talent. Whereas Cade obviously has put in work too, but it's more so talent than hard work.
Yeah, I completely respect Jalen Brunson and his game. And I think that, there's a lot of weird stuff going on when he went to the Knicks and moving from Dallas, but I totally respect his game. I think he's a great point guard, but I think if you're starting a team and you're trying to build a team around somebody, there's not many better options than Cade Cunningham in today's NBA. You can put out names like Victor Wembanyama, Paulo Banchero, some of these younger guys, John Morant, but Cade is in the conversation with those guys. And I just don't know, Jalen Brunson is, I don't think, in that conversation as a franchise starter. And Cade's proving to be a franchise starter by what he's doing with the Detroit Pistons right now and turning that franchise around. So greatly respect Cade, and you have to choose him every time. That will do it for episode number 12 of season 3. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment below your thoughts on who's better, Jalen Brunson or Cade Cunningham. We'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.